teller slid the paper across the counter, and my eyes locked on one number that did not make sense. 13,000 and some change. I stared at it so hard my vision pulsed, like the ink might move if I pushed it with my mind. My throat went dry. My hands went cold against the smooth edge of the counter. I heard the air conditioner and the soft clicking of a keyboard behind the glass, and that was it. The future I had been walking toward all morning suddenly felt like it had dropped out from under me. I had come to the bank expecting relief. That was the whole point of this trip. My great-aunt had planned it. She had made a point of planning it. In our family, girls were not supposed to ask for much, but she had asked for us. She had built something quiet and solid, a way out that nobody could argue with because it was already done. An education fund, my name on it, money that could not be talked away or delayed until later. I had repeated that to myself for weeks. I had pictured tuition payments, books, housing, a clean start. I had pictured my mother finally having to accept it because the money was there. I leaned closer to the paper and checked again. Maybe I read it wrong. Maybe my eyes skipped a digit. I lifted my phone and opened the notes where I had written the account number from the old documents, the ones my mother kept in a folder like they were important. I compared every number, slow and careful. The account matched. The name matched. Everything matched except the balance. I swallowed and asked the teller to print the full statement. My voice sounded too polite for how fast my heart was moving. She looked at me the way people did when they thought you were about to cry, but you had not done it yet. She printed more pages and slid them over. I scanned the lines, expecting some banking error, some missing transfer, some temporary hold. But what I saw was worse because it was clear. Withdrawals, large ones, not mistakes, not fees. Real money taken out in chunks, over time, like someone had been emptying a container they owned. I felt my face get hot. I read the dates, and my mind tried to build excuses. Maybe the account got moved. Maybe the bank merged. Maybe there was another account I did not know about. My great-aunt had lived in America at the end. She had done things her own way. Maybe she had split it. Maybe she had created a second fund. The ideas came fast because they had to. Because the other options sat there in black ink, waiting for me to admit it. I asked the teller who made the withdrawals. She hesitated, then turned the screen slightly toward herself, not toward me, like the information could bite. She said the account had authorized adults on it. She did not say their names out loud at first. She asked for my ID again, then spoke in a careful voice. The withdrawals had been made under my parents' access. She said it like she was reading weather, like it was normal, like parents taking money meant for their daughter's college was the same as paying a phone bill. The bank suddenly felt too bright. The sunlight through the window looked sharp, like a blade laid across the floor. I remembered being a kid in the back seat while my great-aunt visited once, her hair pinned neatly, her posture straight. She had looked at me like I mattered in a way that made me sit up taller. She had asked about my grades. She had asked what I wanted to do. When I said I wanted to study and leave, she had nodded serious, like it was a promise between us. I had carried that promise in my chest for years, and now I was holding a statement that showed it had been sold off without me even being told. I gathered the pages and forced myself to thank the teller. My mouth made the words, but I did not feel them. I walked out of the bank with the sun on my face and the paper shaking in my hands. Outside, cars moved normally. People laughed near the ATM. The world behaved like nothing had happened, and that made it worse. I sat in my car and stared at the statement until the numbers blurred. I tried to breathe slowly. I tried to make myself calm enough to think, but the only thought that stayed was a simple one that hurt the most. A college fund was promised, but someone already spent it. I started the car and drove home without music, without calling anyone, without even knowing what I would say when I walked through the door. My parents had acted calm for months whenever I talked about university. My mother had nodded and smiled like it was all settled. My father had told me to focus on my grades and leave the money part to them. I had believed him because I wanted to, because believing them was easier than imagining this. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the paper on the passenger seat looked like evidence, not of a mistake, but of a choice. And one question kept pressing harder the closer I got to the front door. If my own parents took it, what did they spend it on? I sat in my car with the bank papers on my lap, and the only way my mind could survive the shock was by going backward. I kept seeing my great-aunt's face, calm and firm, like she had already argued with the world and won. In my family, girls were raised with soft limits. You could be smart, but not too loud about it. You could dream, but only if the dream did not pull you too far from home. Education for boys was treated like an investment. Education for girls was treated like a decoration, something that looked nice until it became inconvenient. My great-aunt never accepted that. People spoke about her in two voices. In public, they praised her because she had a title and money and an American life they liked to mention. In private, they called her difficult. They said she had forgotten her place. They said she had traveled too much and learned too many strange ideas. I heard those words as a child and did not understand them. Later, I did. It was their way of warning the rest of us not to copy her. She had left home young. She had studied in London when most women in our family were expected to marry and disappear into housework. She became a doctor. The first time I heard that, I felt something open inside me, like a door I did not know existed. Then she married and moved to America, and that became part of the story too. Not just that she succeeded, but that she succeeded far away, where nobody could tell her no. When she visited, she did not bring loud gifts. She brought questions. She asked me what I read. She asked what subjects I liked. She asked what I thought I was capable of. Those were not normal questions for adults in my world. Adults asked if you were obedient. They asked if you helped your mother. They asked if you had learned to keep your voice low. My great-aunt looked at me like my brain was not a problem to solve, but a tool to sharpen. She was especially focused on the girls. She did not hide it. She said girls in our family deserved choices, not just survival. She said education was not selfish. She said it was safety. She said it was the difference between being trapped by anyone who controlled money and being able to walk away. After she died, her name became a soft ghost in our house. My mother spoke about her with respect and sadness, but also with a strange tension, like any praise came with a price. That was when I first heard about the accounts. My great-aunt had set up education, savings for as many girl relatives as she could, not just for her daughters, but for nieces and grandnieces, like she was planting flags in the future. She had done it through the bank, through paperwork, through systems that did not care about family opinions. My mother told me about mine, the way you tell someone about a locked room they would enter later. She said it was for university. She said my great-aunt wanted me to have it. My father nodded when it came up, like it was settled and under control. I did not ask for details because I did not want to sound ungrateful or desperate. In my family, a girl who asked too many questions was treated like a girl who could not be trusted. But the money never felt like just money. It felt like a hand on my shoulder from someone who had already escaped. It felt like permission. It felt like proof that at least one person in my bloodline believed I was meant for more than being quiet and useful. That was why the bank balance hurt so much. It was not only the missing dollars, it was the missing message. This money was not random. It was a message. And when I held that statement and saw those withdrawals, one thought pressed into me, heavy and sharp. So why was my message missing? In my family, the rules did not hang on the wall. They lived in people's faces. A pause that lasted too long. A look that warned you not to continue. A change in tone when you stepped close to a truth that embarrassed someone older than you. I learned early that the safest way to live was to read those signals and stop myself before anyone had to correct me. The first rule was that family came before the individual, not in a warm way, in a public way. If one person acted out, everyone felt the heat. People did not ask what happened. They asked who heard about it. They asked what neighbors would say. They asked if the wrong auntie would call the wrong cousin. The fear was never about the problem. It was always about the story of the problem escaping the house. The second rule was that respect meant agreement. If my father said something, the conversation ended. If my mother said, "Do not talk about this," then it became a secret that everyone still discussed behind closed doors. If I questioned anything, the word disrespect appeared fast, like a weapon taken off a shelf. It did not matter if I was right. Being right was not the goal. Being quiet was. The third rule was that sons carried the family name and daughters carried the family's reputation. I did not hear it said that way, but it was how life worked. My brother had freedom. He could stay out late. He could make mistakes. People shrugged and said boys were boys. But if I spoke too loudly, if I dressed wrong, if I pushed back in a conversation, it was treated like I had damaged something valuable. like I had made the family look unstable. That was why weddings mattered so much. Weddings were not only celebrations, they were performances. They were proof to the community that the family was strong, generous, respected. The guest list was long on purpose. Every plate of food, every decoration, every gift bag was a message. Look how well we did. Look how united we were. Look how our children turned out. I had watched other weddings in our circle and felt the pressure in the air like humidity. Women spent weeks talking about outfits and seating and who greeted which elders first. Men discussed venues and costs like they were planning a political campaign. When a wedding went well, people repeated it for years, like the family had won a prize. When a wedding went badly, people remembered that too, and they remembered it with joy. So I grew up understanding something important. A wedding could erase problems. A wedding could cover cracks. A wedding could make everyone forget what they were angry about, as long as the pictures looked beautiful. I also understood that a daughter's education did not create the same public proof. A diploma did not feed guests. A tuition payment did not impress the aunties the way a big hall and a big meal did. When I talked about university, my parents acted like they supported me, but only in the way that stayed safe. They liked the idea as long as it did not cost them anything, as long as it did not create gossip, as long as it did not make other people ask questions about why their daughter wanted to leave. Their approval always felt conditional, like a door that could close if I pushed it too hard. That was why, sitting in my car with the bank statement, I felt more than betrayal. I felt danger. Because if my parents had taken the money, then telling the truth would not only start a fight, it would break the most protected rule of all. In this family, respect often meant silence, and silence was exactly what they expected from me. Graduation day still clung to me when I drove to the bank. My gown was already returned, but the feeling stayed. People had hugged me and told me I was going to do great things. My mother had smiled for photos. My father had stood a little taller, like my success belonged to him too. I had held my acceptance papers in my bag like a passport. I kept telling myself that the hard part was over. The plan was simple. I would take the money my great aunt left, pay the first tuition bill, and secure housing. I would buy my books without panic. I would start university without begging anyone. I had already mapped it out in my head. I knew the deadlines. I knew the amounts. I knew exactly what that education fund was supposed to protect me from. At the bank, I felt almost proud when I gave my ID. I felt like an adult, like I was finally stepping into the life I had promised myself. The teller typed and nodded and turned to the printer. The paper came out with a soft, mechanical sound. Then she slid it to me, and the world narrowed to one line. Balance 13,000. I reread it. I blinked hard. I checked the account number. I checked my name. Everything matched. The balance did not. My chest tightened like someone had pulled a strap around it. I asked if there was another account connected to it. The teller said no. I asked if it was showing a partial balance. She said it was current. I asked for the statement. She printed it, page after page, and the truth grew with every line. Large withdrawals, not once, not twice, many times. Money taken out in pieces, like someone had been draining it carefully. I tried to do the math in my head, and it made me feel sick. Tuition alone would eat most of what was left. Housing would finish it. Books, fees, meals, transportation. There would be nothing. There would be no cushion. There would be no second semester. I saw myself calling the university office, trying to explain. I saw myself taking loans, signing papers I did not fully understand, promising years of repayment for money I had been told was already mine. The teller explained that my parents had authorized access. She did not sound angry. She sounded neutral, like the bank saw this all the time. That made my skin crawl. It meant this was not an accident anyone would rush to fix. It meant it was allowed. I walked out with the statement in my hand like it was proof of a crime nobody wanted to name. In the car, the silence felt thick. I could hear my own breathing and the faint hum of the engine. I kept staring at the withdrawals, at the dates, trying to find a reason that did not turn my parents into strangers. There was none. The plan collapsed in one bank statement. I sat there and forced myself to think clearly. If I paid the first bill with what was left, I would still need loans soon. If I did not pay the bill, I would lose my place at university. Either way, the money being gone had already changed my life. It had pushed me toward debt before I even stepped onto campus. I wiped my palms on my jeans and drove home. Every red light felt like a delay before impact. I kept hearing my father's voice telling me to trust them with the money part. I kept seeing my mother's calm face whenever I mentioned school, like she knew something I did not. When I parked in the driveway, I did not feel like a daughter coming home. I felt like a witness returning to the scene. The house looked normal. The curtains were still, the porch clean, everything quiet and controlled. I gripped the statement and walked to the door, because there was only one question that mattered now, and asking it could blow up everything. I walked into the house with the bank statement folded in my hand, so tight it left a crease in my skin. My mother stood at the kitchen counter, and my father sat at the table like he was waiting for news. They both looked normal. That normality made me feel unreal, like I was the only person who could see the floor moving under us. I did not start with shouting. I could not. My voice came out small at first, even though my heart felt violent. I asked my mother if she knew why my education account only had 13,000 left. I said the number slowly, like saying it clearly would force it to change. My mother did not ask what I meant. She did not look surprised. Her eyes dropped for a second. Then she set something down and wiped her hands as if she had been expecting this moment. She said in a quiet voice that there were expenses. She said they had handled it. She said I should not panic. I turned to my father because he was the one who always spoke like rules. I asked him why they withdrew money from my account. He looked at me like I had accused him of something shameful in public. He told me to lower my voice. I had not raised it. He told me to sit. I did not sit. He said they needed it. That word hit me harder than I expected. Needed, like it was medicine, like it was food, like there had been no other option. I unfolded the statement and put it on the table between us. The pages slid a little, and I pressed them flat with my palm. I pointed at the withdrawals, one after another. I asked what need looked like when it came in large amounts, taken again and again. I asked what emergency lasted that long. My mother kept her voice soft, like softness could make it right. She said family situations happened. She said sometimes parents had to make decisions. She said I was still young and did not understand how money worked. That made my face burn. I understood exactly how money worked. I understood what it meant to watch it disappear from an account with my name on it. I asked if my sister's account was gone too. My mother hesitated, and that hesitation answered me. My father said it was not my business. He said my great-aunt had left that money to the family, and they had managed it. He said I would still go to university, so I needed to stop acting like I had been robbed. My stomach turned at the word managed. Managed sounded like care. This felt like theft done with clean hands. I asked them why they did not tell me. My mother said they did not want to stress me. My father said talking about money created division. He said the family did not discuss these things with outsiders, and I needed to remember where I came from. His eyes stayed on my face like he was measuring how far I would go. I tried to hold myself steady. I asked again what they needed it for. My mother looked toward the hallway, then back at me. She said it was for something important. She said it was for the family. She said I would understand one day. That was when I felt the evasion like a cold draft. They were not telling me because the reason was not an emergency. It was a choice they did not want to defend. I thought about calling my friends, the ones who had grown up in America, who always spoke in straight lines. If I told them my parents emptied my college fund, they would not ask about respect. They would ask how fast I could report it. They would tell me it was wrong, and wrong was enough. In my house, wrong was not enough. Wrong still had to obey. I looked at my parents and realized they expected the old ending. They expected me to swallow it. They expected me to be grateful for whatever crumbs remained. They expected silence. They called it need. I called it taking. I stared at the statement again, and I said the only thing left. I asked where the money went. My mother's mouth tightened. My father's jaw shifted like he was biting down on anger. And in that small pause, I felt the truth moving toward me, heavy and unavoidable. Then I found out where it actually went. My mother's eyes flicked toward the living room wall where framed photos still hung. I had not noticed them when I walked in, but now they felt loud. Smiling faces, bright clothes, a crowded hall, my brother in the center, lifted by the attention like it was a throne. My father answered first, like he wanted to end it fast. He said the money went to the wedding. For a second, I did not understand his words. Not because they were unclear, but because my mind refused to accept them. A wedding was not an emergency. A wedding was not rent or medicine. A wedding was not survival. I asked him to repeat it. He did. He said my brother's wedding costs had been high. He said the family had expectations. He said there had been pressure. He said it like those words were supposed to make me nod and accept it. I felt my body go still, like fear had turned into something harder. I remembered that wedding in sharp pieces. The entrance, the music, the gold decorations, the tables full of food, people laughing and taking videos like they were recording a victory. I remembered the way relatives had praised my parents for doing it properly, for doing it big. I remembered being pulled into photos, told to smile, told to look happy for my brother. I had smiled. I had smiled while my future was being spent behind my back. I looked down at the statement again, and the dates lined up with my memory. Not one big withdrawal. Many. The deposits for the hall, the clothing, the catering, the gifts, the things people did not notice unless they were the ones paying. My chest tightened as I pictured each part of the celebration getting approved, getting paid, getting applauded, while nobody thought about what it would cost me. My mother stepped in quickly, like she could soften it. She said it was only fair. She said my brother needed a proper start. She said people watched weddings and people talked. She said if they did not do it right, the shame would have followed him and followed us. She said it was for the family. I asked why it had to be my money. My father's face hardened. He said the accounts were under their control. He said my great aunt had trusted them. He said I should be grateful they left anything at all. Then he said something that made my stomach drop even lower. He said my brother was a son. He said his wedding represented all of us. He said my education was still possible, but a wedding only happened once. I turned and called for my sister. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, too sharp, too exposed. She came in from the hallway, and when she saw my face and the papers, she already knew what it was about. She did not look shocked. She looked tired. I asked her if they took money from her account too. She shrugged once, small and careless. She said yes. She said it did not matter because she had not planned to go to college anyway. She said it was better used for something important. Then she glanced at my parents like she was checking if she had said the correct thing. That was when I felt it clearly. The shape of the family rules. The weight of what my great aunt had tried to fight. My brother's happiness had been treated like a public duty. My education had been treated like a private option. Something that could be delayed, reduced, reshaped, as long as nobody outside saw the cost. I looked at the wedding photos again, and they changed in my mind. The smiles became masks. The decorations became proof. The applause became something stolen. It felt like I had been standing in a bright room full of people while someone quietly emptied my pockets. My college fund became someone else's spotlight. I did not cry. I did not yell. I felt something colder settle inside me, something that did not ask for permission anymore. My parents watched my face like they were waiting for me to break, to beg, to fold into the role they understood. Instead, I asked one more question, slow and steady, because I needed them to hear it. If the family chose the wedding over my education, what choice did I have now? I did not win the argument in that kitchen. There was no apology, no sudden shame, no promise to fix it. My father repeated the same line until it sounded like a prayer. He said I should stop because family business stayed inside the family. My mother said I was making it ugly. My sister watched like it was a storm she hoped would pass without touching her. I stood there with the statement still on the table, and I understood something that made my throat go tight. If I stayed, the money would stay gone, and my voice would stay small. They would wait me out. They would shame me until I learned to accept it. So I left the table first. I went to my room and pulled a suitcase from the closet. My hands moved fast, but my mind moved slower, like it tried to catch up to my body. I packed only what mattered: documents, my laptop, a few clothes, the acceptance letter. I kept thinking someone would follow me and stop me, not with comfort, but with anger. When the hallway stayed silent, it felt worse. It felt like they had already decided I was the problem, not the theft. My mother appeared in the doorway when I zipped the suitcase. She asked where I thought I was going. I told her I needed space. She said space was for strangers, not daughters. Then she said something that burned. She said if I walked out, people would talk. She said I would embarrass them. She did not say, "Do not go because I love you." She said, "Do not go because of what they will say." I carried the suitcase past her anyway. My father waited near the front door, arms crossed, like he was guarding the family name. He said I was acting spoiled. He said university did not make someone better than their parents. He said I would come back when I calmed down. I did not answer. I walked out because if I opened my mouth, I knew I would scream. That night I stayed with a friend. I lay in a strange bed with my phone face down beside me, waiting for a message that never came. No, we are sorry. No, we will fix it. Only silence, the kind they used as a leash. In the morning, I sat at a desk and opened my university portal. The tuition deadline glowed on the screen like a threat. I called the financial aid office and asked what my options were. The woman on the phone spoke kindly, like this was normal. She said student loans were available. She said I could apply right away. When I clicked the application, my finger hovered over the trackpad for a long time. I felt like I stood on a ledge. One choice meant debt. The other meant giving up the life my great aunt tried to buy for me. I filled in the forms. I entered numbers I hated. I answered questions that made my stomach twist. When the final page asked me to accept the terms, the words looked heavy, like chains written in clean font. I read them twice. Then I accepted. The confirmation screen loaded. Approved. My breath left my body in one long, shaking line. Fear came first. Then relief followed it, sharp and clean. I had just signed myself into years of repayment, but I had also saved my place at university without begging my parents for scraps. I stared at the screen until my eyes hurt and finally understood the new shape of my life. My parents had used my future to buy a celebration. Now, I had used my future to buy it back, one loan at a time. I lost money, but I gained clarity. I still had 13,000 left in that account, but it no longer felt like help. It felt like proof they could take almost everything and expect gratitude for what remained. I looked at my suitcase by the door, then at the loan confirmation again, and I realized clarity did not pay tuition. So I made a bigger move. I filed the lawsuit in a small office that smelled like old paper and cold coffee. The lawyer spoke in a calm voice, but the words felt sharp. Unauthorized withdrawals. Intended purpose. Beneficiary. He asked me if I understood what it meant to sue my own parents. I told him I understood it too well. I signed my name anyway, and the pen did not shake until the last letter. The moment it became official, it stopped being only my problem. It became a signal, like a flare shot into the sky over our community. My phone started buzzing before I even made it back to my friend's place. At first, it was my mother. She left a voicemail that did not say my name. She said I had crossed a line. She said I had humiliated them. She said I was tearing the family apart for money. Then my father texted one sentence that felt like a closed door. If you continue, do not come back. Then the calls spread outward like ripples. An aunt I barely spoke to called and asked why I wanted to destroy my parents. A cousin messaged that everyone was talking and I needed to stop. Someone I did not even have saved in my contacts wrote, "This is private business. Handle it at home." It kept repeating in different voices, the same message dressed in different words. Private business. They said it like it was sacred, like a shield, like the word itself could erase what happened. I did not go to any gatherings after that. I did not have to. The invitations stopped. The family group chat went quiet for a day, then returned without me. Photos appeared online of dinners I was not invited to. Smiling faces lined up like proof that the family was fine without the disobedient daughter. The worst part was how they talked to me like I was greedy, not injured. Nobody asked how I would pay for school now. Nobody asked how it felt to sit in a bank and see my future missing. They asked why I could not just forgive. They asked why I could not just be grateful for the 13,000 left. They asked why I could not let it go for the sake of peace. Peace in their mouths, meant surrender. My mother finally showed up in person outside my classes one afternoon. She stood stiff on the sidewalk, eyes scanning for anyone who might recognize her. She did not hug me. She leaned close and whispered like she was sharing a secret, not a warning. She said people were ashamed of me. She said I was damaging my brother's marriage by bringing this up. She said my great aunt would have hated what I was doing. That one hit deep because my great aunt had been the only person in the family who treated my education like it mattered as much as any man's milestone. I wanted to say that out loud, but my mother's face stayed hard and afraid, like she was bracing for impact. When I did not back down, the tone changed. The messages stopped pretending to be advice and became threats made polite. Someone told me I would regret it. Someone told me no man would want a woman who sued her parents. Someone told me my younger cousins were watching and I was teaching them rebellion. It felt like the whole community lined up to push me back into silence. That was when I understood something clearly. The lawsuit was not just legal, it was social. It was a public refusal to accept the rules I grew up under. And the punishment for refusing was isolation. One night, after hours of staring at loan numbers and tuition deadlines, my phone rang again. I expected another aunt, another lecture, another demand that I stop making private business public. But the name on the screen made my throat tight. It was my brother calling, and when I answered, he spoke softly, like he wanted to sound reasonable. He said he had an offer that could make this all go away. My brother's voice sounded careful, like he had practiced it. He asked how I was doing, but he did not wait for an answer. He said he wanted this to end. He said our parents were not sleeping. He said the family was being torn apart. He said my lawsuit was making everyone look bad. Then he said the word I had been waiting to hear from anyone in my family. He said he would pay for my university. For a moment, the offer pulled at me so hard it almost hurt. I pictured the loan balance sitting there like a shadow. I pictured the next tuition bill. I pictured relief, simple and immediate, like breathing after being underwater. I wanted to say yes just to make the noise stop. I wanted to stop being the person everyone blamed. But I had lived through promises before. I had lived through smiles that hid decisions made without me. I asked him how he planned to pay. He said he had a good job and he would make it work. He said he could help each semester. He said he would cover what the fund should have covered. He said he just needed me to drop the lawsuit so we could move on. Move on. Like this had been a misunderstanding. Like my future had not been traded for one bright day. I sat on the edge of my bed with the phone pressed to my ear, and I tried to keep my voice steady. I told him I would consider it, but only if it was written and legally binding. I said I needed a contract. The silence on the line turned thick. When he spoke again, his voice was not careful anymore. He asked if I was serious. He said I was treating him like a stranger. He said family did not need contracts. He said I was making it worse. I told him I was not trying to punish him. I told him I needed certainty. I had already watched money disappear from an account that was supposed to be safe. I had watched my parents look at me and call it need. Trust was not something I could afford anymore. He exhaled hard, like I had insulted him. Then he said it. He called me an asshole. He said I was ungrateful. He said he was trying to fix it, and I was still attacking the family. He said if I really cared about us, I would drop the lawsuit and let him handle it quietly. He said a contract made him look like a criminal. That word landed in my head and stayed there. Criminal, like I had accused him, like the money had just fallen into his wedding by accident. My throat tightened and my hands went cold. I asked him a simple question. If he wanted me to trust him, why had he accepted a wedding paid for with my education money? He started talking fast. He said he did not know at first. He said our parents told him it was handled. He said weddings were complicated. He said there were expectations. He said the community watched everything. He said he was not the one who took the money. I listened to him build a wall out of excuses, each one placed carefully, each one meant to keep his hands clean. And maybe he had not signed the withdrawal slips. Maybe he had not sat in the bank and watched the balance drop. But he had stood under the lights and let people praise him while my future was used to buy the shine. I told him I did not hate him. That was the truth, and it made everything worse. If I hated him, it would have been simple. But I loved him, and I still felt betrayed. I told him that if he truly wanted to fix it, he would not be afraid of a contract. A contract would protect both of us. It would turn his offer into something real. He said I was obsessed with money. I said I was obsessed with my life. He went quiet again, and when he spoke, he sounded wounded, not guilty. He said I was choosing this fight. He said I was choosing to shame our parents. He said I would regret it when the family was gone. After we hung up, I stared at the wall for a long time, feeling the same heavy truth settle in my chest. They did not want to repair what they broke. They wanted me to make it disappear. They wanted forgiveness. I wanted guarantees. And the question that kept circling in my mind did not feel like a legal question anymore. It felt like a moral wound that would not close. So who was really wrong here? Me for suing, or them for taking? After my brother called me an asshole, I stopped trusting my own judgment. The pressure did not come from one person anymore. It came from every direction. My family said I was evil. My friends said I was being used. My lawyer said I had a case, but a case did not tell me if I was still a daughter. So I did the thing I never thought I would do. I told the story online, in a place where nobody knew my last name. I laid out the facts like evidence. My great-aunt had set money aside for my education. My parents had taken most of it. $13,000 remained. The rest had paid for my brother's wedding. I had taken loans. I had moved out. I had filed a lawsuit. Then I waited, like I had put my life on a table for strangers to point at. The responses came fast, and they did not sound like my community. They sounded like a courtroom where people argued values, not just details. It felt unreal to watch my private shame become a public debate. But it also felt honest, because nobody there could punish me with family rules. One group came in hard and clear. To them, the question was simple. They focused on the intent of the gift. They said the money had been meant for my education, and that intent mattered more than who had access to the account. They said my parents had broken trust in a way that could not be fixed with guilt or tradition. They talked about student loans like they were a scar that lasted for decades. They described the interest, the stress, the way debt followed you into adulthood like a shadow. They said I did not choose this fight. They said it had been forced on me the day my parents decided a wedding was worth more than my future. Reading those messages made my throat tighten, not because they were kind, but because they named the thing my family refused to name. Taking was taking, even when it happened inside a home. I felt a strange relief, like someone finally spoke in the language of fairness instead of obedience. But another group sounded calmer, and somehow that calm felt colder. They did not call my parents innocent, but they treated the story like a complicated contract. They pointed out that my parents had access to the accounts. They asked what kind of account it had been, and whether my great aunt had set legal limits or only moral ones. They separated what was allowed from what was right. They said it was possible my parents believed they were managing family resources, not stealing from me. They said some families did not see money as individual property, especially when elders trusted parents to decide. They did not defend the wedding choice directly, but they kept circling the same idea. If my parents had legal power, then maybe I should have handled it quietly. Maybe court was too extreme. Maybe there were details I did not know. They asked if there had been any need, any pressure, any reason that could have made my parents feel trapped. They did not invent new emergencies, but they left space for the word my parents used, need, like it could still mean something. That group unsettled me because it sounded like my father. It sounded like the way my mother spoke about shame. It sounded like a warning dressed as logic. It reminded me that even when strangers agreed my parents were wrong, some still hesitated to say I was right to fight back. I read everything until my eyes hurt. The same facts produced opposite verdicts. In one camp, I was protecting myself from long-term damage. In the other camp, I was escalating a family conflict into a public attack. One side treated my great-aunt's gift like a promise to me. The other side treated it like a resource my parents could redirect, even if it was unfair. Online, the same facts create opposite verdicts. The most disturbing part was how quickly people chose a side without knowing what it felt like to live inside my family's rules. Some messages told me to go no contact and never look back, like family was optional. Other messages told me to drop everything and forgive, like my future was optional. Both sides sounded certain. Both sides made me feel more alone, because certainty was easy for people who did not have to face my parents' eyes. Late that night, I scrolled back through the comments again and again, searching for a final answer that did not exist. What I found instead was a pattern. The harshest arguments were not about money. They were about loyalty. They were about who a daughter belonged to. They were about whether a woman had the right to say, "This was meant for me, and I will not give it up." And I realized something that made my stomach drop, because it explained why my family sounded so confident when they called me shameful. But the debate gets sharper when culture enters the room. Once culture entered the conversation, the tone changed. People stopped talking only about bank accounts and started talking about shame, duty, and what a daughter was supposed to endure without complaint. It felt like I watched two worlds collide over my head, and I stood in the middle with bruises from both sides. A whole camp formed around one belief. They said I should respect the culture and not shame the family. They treated reputation like a real object, something fragile that could break and never return. They said elders should be handled privately, with closed doors and quiet voices. They said it did not matter who was right, because the public fight itself was wrong. They said court was a betrayal. They said airing it out would follow my parents for years, and I would be the person who caused it. When I read those messages, I felt sick because I understood them too well. I had grown up hearing the same warning in different forms. Do not talk outside the house. Do not embarrass your father. Do not make people look at us. Shame was not just an emotion in my community. Shame was a weapon, and everyone knew how to use it. It was not only my parents' reputation they worried about. It was ours. Even after they took from me, I still carried their name on my face. In that mindset, my lawsuit did not look like self-protection. It looked like a daughter trying to win against her own blood. It looked unnatural. It looked selfish. That camp also talked about weddings in a way that made my stomach twist. They described the wedding like a public duty, a display that represented the whole family's worth. They treated it like an investment in status. They implied that the wedding had fed many mouths and honored many people, while education fed only one person. In that logic, the celebration mattered because it was visible. My degree mattered less because it was personal. The more I read, the more I realized this was the real fight. The money was just the evidence left behind. Then another camp pushed back just as hard, and their words hit me like a hand on my shoulder, steadying me. They said culture was not an excuse for taking from women. They pointed out that my great-aunt had created those funds for a reason. She had seen this pattern before. She had watched girls be treated like temporary members of their own families. She had watched boys receive investments while girls were told to be quiet and flexible and grateful. They said the theft was not random. It was the system repeating itself. They said education was not a luxury. It was safety. It was the difference between choice and dependence. They said my parents had not just spent money. They had tried to pull me back into the role they preferred, the role my sister accepted without a fight. Reading those messages made my chest ache because they connected everything in a way I had avoided admitting. I had told myself this was only about the wedding, only about my parents, only about one bad decision. But the pattern was older than me. It was older than my brother's marriage. It was older than my parents' excuses. It was the reason my great aunt had taken herself to London, had become a doctor, had moved across an ocean, and still remembered the girls back home. She had tried to build a bridge for us, made of careful planning and quiet generosity. And my parents had used that bridge as a floor for a party. The fund was created to fight a system. Then the system took it back. That thought made me angry in a way that felt clean. It removed the fog. It made the conflict less confusing. My great aunt had not left that money because she wanted a nice family moment. She left it because she knew what happened when women were denied their own futures. Still, the cultural argument did not disappear just because I wanted it to. It lived inside me. I still felt the old reflex to protect my parents, even as they tried to destroy my choices. I still felt fear when I pictured relatives whispering. I still felt the urge to fix the situation by shrinking myself. That was the hardest part to explain to my friends. They told me to cut my family off, like it was a toggle switch. They did not understand that shame worked like gravity. You could fight it, but it still pulled at you every day. Online, I saw people arguing over that gravity. Some said it was respect. Some said it was control. Some said it was tradition. Some said it was abuse with a polite name. I read until my head throbbed, and I realized I had been trained to call inequality normal. And then the conversation shifted again, and it got even more painful. People stopped talking about my parents and started talking about my brother. They asked what he knew and when he knew it. They argued about whether he was just a groom caught in the middle or a man who benefited from taking from his sisters. They questioned whether his offer to pay was generosity or a way to protect himself and the family name. I stared at those messages and felt my stomach drop because it forced me to look at him in a way I had avoided. And then people argued about the brother's role. Was he responsible too? When people started debating my brother, I felt like I had swallowed a stone. I had spent so much energy aiming my anger at my parents that I had treated him like background. He was the reason they gave for everything, but he was also my brother. I had grown up with him. I had defended him in 100 small ways. Now strangers were asking if he was part of the harm or only the person the harm was built around. One camp said the answer was simple. They said it did not matter who withdrew the money. It mattered who benefited. They saw the wedding as the final destination of my education fund, and they said the person standing at that destination carried responsibility. They argued that fairness meant restitution, even if it felt uncomfortable. If my brother accepted a wedding partly paid for with my future, then paying it back was not a gift. It was repair. They also pointed out something that made me sit up straight. My brother's offer sounded like peace, but peace was never free. It had a price, and the price was my lawsuit. They said if he truly wanted to fix the damage, he could pay and still let the legal process continue until the agreement was completed. They said dropping the case first would leave me exposed again. They said people who benefited from harm often wanted the conflict to end quickly because time made guilt harder to ignore. I hated how true that felt. My brother had not called to ask what I needed. He had called to end the embarrassment. He had called when the story stopped staying inside the house. His offer had not arrived on the day I found the account drained. It arrived when the community started whispering. Another camp pushed back, and their argument hit a different nerve. They said demanding a contract from my brother was too harsh. They said legal documents inside a family felt hostile, like I was holding a knife while claiming I wanted peace. They said trust could not be rebuilt through threats. They said my contract demand turned a personal dispute into a transaction, and it would poison whatever relationship remained. They warned me that even if I won financially, I might lose everyone. They said I would be remembered as the girl who took her parents to court, not the girl who wanted to stay in school. They framed my lawsuit like a match near dry grass. They said I was escalating, and escalation had consequences that money could not fix. That argument should have made me doubt myself. Instead, it made me think about the word trust and how cheaply my family used it. They treated trust like an obligation I owed them, not something they had to earn. They wanted me to trust my brother after my parents had already proven that my needs could be sacrificed for a celebration. They wanted me to trust the same system that had already failed me. I kept thinking about what a contract really represented. It was not an attack. It was proof. It was memory written down. It was a promise that could not be edited later by shame and pressure. Without a contract, my brother's offer depended on his mood, his finances, and his willingness to keep choosing me when the community chose silence. That was a fragile kind of safety, but I also understood why my demand offended him. In my family, paperwork belonged to strangers and enemies. A contract meant you believed someone might lie. It meant you expected betrayal. It meant you refused to be controlled by feelings and guilt. To my brother, it probably sounded like I had already decided he was guilty and that I wanted him to pay like a criminal. The most unsettling part was that both sides made sense, depending on which pain you focused on. If you focused on my debt, the contract looked like protection. If you focused on the family, the contract looked like a threat. The same document could either stop harm or start a war. The same contract can look like safety or a threat. I reread the comments until the words blurred, and I realized something about the peace offers in my life. They always came with a condition that made me smaller. Be quiet. Come home. Drop the lawsuit. Stop embarrassing us. Forgive without repair. trust without proof. It was never, "We were wrong and we will make it right in a way that protects you." That was why my brother's offer left me cold. If he truly wanted peace, he would have wanted a clear plan, not a vague promise. If he truly cared about my future, he would have understood why I could not walk into another trap with my eyes open. Still, the fear stayed. Not fear of court, fear of what came after. I pictured holidays where my name was not spoken. I pictured cousins being told not to invite me. I pictured my parents growing old and telling everyone I abandoned them for money. I pictured my brother resenting me forever, even if he paid. I sat alone with my phone in my hand, and I felt like I stood at the edge of two losses, trying to choose one. If I dropped the lawsuit, I risked being betrayed again. If I continued, I may have lost my family forever. I lived in the space between two kinds of shame. One was the shame my community placed on me, heavy and public, like I had walked into the street and screamed secrets. The other was quieter. It came from inside me. It asked if I had become the kind of person who could sue her parents and still sleep at night. I did sleep, but it never felt clean. I woke up thinking about numbers. I thought about interest. I thought about how many hours I would need to work to cover a single semester. I thought about the way debt did not end when class ended. Debt followed you. Debt waited for you after graduation. Debt changed the kind of job you could take, the kind of apartment you could rent, the kind of life you could risk. And underneath all of it, I thought about my great aunt. I remembered her voice from the few times I met her, calm and direct. I remembered the way she looked at me like my future was not a decoration. It was a right. She had built those education funds for girls because she knew how quickly a girl's life could be decided for her. She had escaped that fate by leaving, studying, becoming a doctor, and building a life on her own terms. Then she tried to leave a piece of that freedom behind for the rest of us. When I looked at my lawsuit through that lens, it stopped feeling like greed. It started feeling like restoration. It felt like I was trying to return the gift to its purpose, the purpose she chose in a family that did not always choose women. Still, I could not pretend it was easy. I felt ashamed when I imagined my parents hearing their names spoken in legal rooms. I felt ashamed when I pictured older relatives shaking their heads, telling young girls that this was what happened when women became too Western, too loud, too independent. I felt ashamed when my mother said I was killing the family from the inside. But I also felt something stronger than shame. I felt resolve, because the truth was simple, even if the culture around it was not. My parents had taken money that was meant for my education and used it for my brother's wedding. That choice had pushed me into loans and uncertainty. It had forced me to build my future with borrowed bricks. And then they demanded gratitude, silence, and loyalty as payment. My American friends kept telling me I did not owe my family my future. They told me it was theft, plain and ugly. They told me to protect myself because nobody else in my house would. Their support felt like oxygen, but it also made me feel exposed because they did not carry my community's rules on their backs. At the same time, my culture's pressure felt real too. It was not just people talking. It was relationships, networks, doors that opened or stayed shut. It was the way a family name could shape your life without anyone admitting it. I held both truths at once, and it hurt. My friends were right about fairness. My community was right about consequences. I could win money and still lose my place. I could keep my place and still lose years of my life to debt. This was never only about money. It was about what my life was allowed to be. So I stayed stuck between three choices. I could keep suing and force the truth to stand in daylight, even if it burned every bridge I had left. I could accept my brother's offer, but only with a contract, and risk becoming the villain in a new way. Or I could walk away, carry the debt, and let my great aunt's gift be rewritten into a wedding memory. I did not know which choice made me a good daughter, or if being a good daughter had ever been the real goal. I only knew that no matter what I chose, someone would call me the villain. Should I keep suing, accept my brother's offer with a contract, or walk away and carry the debt? Comment your verdict and explain why.